Imagine a learning environment that addresses not only the academic needs of a child, but also their social and emotional needs. Imagine an environment where kids can feel seen, heard, and valued. Today, my guest is Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy. She's a career school innovator with over 30 years of transforming learning in schools to better serve all students. She's the founding director of Leadership Preparatory Academy, a nonprofit progressive microschool in Washington State. She has a master's degree in educational administration and a doctoral degree in education leadership, and she has extensive understanding of the components needed to transform the education system. And she is here with me today to talk about microschools. You do not want to miss this conversation.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Maureen.
Hey, Karen.
I am so glad that you are here in 2021. We've made it to the other side.
Hallelujah.
Oh, my goodness. It's been a while since we spoke last. I know that the last time we spoke, I think, was when I was on your podcast. And I was talking to you about the fact that I was going to launch this podcast. And so you were actually one of the first to know that this was going to happen.
And here you are doing
here
amazing
I am.
work in a podcast.
Like I said, I'm following in your footsteps. So this is actually the second episode on a series about learning environments for kids. And I think for me, working with so many parents who have kids who think and learn differently, a huge pain point for them is finding the right academic environment for kids. And I knew that when I wanted to do this series that I wanted to have you on because you're such a trailblazer when it comes to transforming the educational experience of children. And so I really wanted you to come on and talk about the work that you're doing and really specifically start with micro school because, the episode that aired before this one was about kind of the independent study model. And this is really, I really want to dive into this episode about the micro school. And I would love it if you would kind of tell our listeners, like, what is a micro school? What exactly is that?
Absolutely. Well, I got asked this question on Good Morning America last summer, and I wanted something super smart. And really, it just means little school. So there's not a super smart definition. But what I am about is small communities where kids are seen, heard, valued, and thriving, and where we've dismantled traditional middle and high school. So not about small schools that are just more of the same. So to me, it's a place where relationships are a given and kids have this sense of love and belonging. So they feel safe and then they're ready to be curious about learning. And then it's passion and purpose driving their learning. So to me, it's a way to do school that you can't do it. What I haven't as a school leader when I have 1,000 or more students in a school.
And what would that look like? So for a parent who's thinking that sounds terrific, what would that actually look like if I were looking at a micro school? What would I see that would look different than a traditional school or even homeschooling if a parent has been homeschooling their child?
Yeah. So what you would see is a strong sense of community and kids having a lot of agency, which means voice and choice. So you would see schools that weave in the social emotional learning, the social communication, the real world issues and kids looking at their strengths and working on how they want to head in their directions of their passion with guidance. So you'd see a very different model ideally, and it wouldn't be the traditional, you need 6 classes a day, you need 4 years of high school English, you need this, but it would really be project-based around kids' passions, and ideally at the high school level, getting them out in the community, working with a village of mentors that tie into their passions so they can be doing aeronautics or animal rescue, things that you might not get to do in a school.
Right. And I love the idea of it connecting to their interests, because we know that when kids kind of learn about things that they're interested in, it engages them. It gets all those neurons all fired up for learning. And then when you can maximize learning and the motivation for learning, kids just thrive, which is ultimately what we want to do.
Yes, but you'd be surprised to know that parents are one of the biggest reasons we don't have more of these schools.
Oh. And what do you think that is? Tell me.
I really think it's this crazy false nostalgia. Oh, but I want my kid to have pep assemblies and varsity football and the good old days weren't all that amazing. There were highs and lows in high school and a lot of in the middle where we were just talked at in school. And parents are like, oh yeah, well that would be an alternative. And I don't know. And they're not saying our system's broken. My kid is miserable. My kid's buried in homework. My kid is anxious. I demand a school that has passion and purpose where my kid is mentored and gets to be an individual. So the parents kind of like haven't committed to a different model. And so they haven't driven the supply and demand in a way to make more of these happen because they're out there, but they're kind of on the fringe alternatives. And our parents are the consumers. And I wish they would say no more to the old high school model where kids just sit and get.
Right. And it feels like, we've progressed so much as a society and as a world, but our educational system looks like it did, 40, 50 years ago. It has not changed.
Can you imagine right now? I mean, I have there's the same high school out there that I experienced. But if in my home, when I was growing up, the phone was a rotary phone connected to the wall. We would not tolerate that for our communication now.
Right.
But we'll tolerate a model that was focused on content when now content is a search engine away. And we won't shift to context. And why do I need to learn chemistry? I need to learn a piece of it because I'm into culinary arts or because I'm into agriculture. I just need that piece. I don't need a textbook of XYZ, says who. But our parents have to say, oh, right. And institutions are the last thing to change. And we're seeing that right now, that there's a cry for institutions to be equitable and to be updated. And education needs to be right there on that list.
Right. And I feel like there's this movement now that got actually some momentum from the COVID pandemic, because parents who were having to, be the supervisors of distance learning were saying that now I want to look at alternatives. And now they had the time to think about having a different kind of educational experience for their children. And it opened a lot of doors and a lot of eyes to things that we can do differently.
That is totally my hope, that they'll say, wait a minute, why would I have my kid buried in all of this reading in an age where we don't? Why would I have them go through textbooks? This is torture. I'm having to help get them through it. This is not what I want my kid. I don't want the joy sucked out of my kid. I want that sixth grader that had a love of learning and a curiosity. I want that spark in my kid. And so I'm not going to tolerate an archaic system that sucks the joy out of my kid's life anymore.
Right. And I mean, one of the things you said is that parents can be a barrier because they have their kind of preconceived notions about what the educational system and experience should look like for their children. So how did you come into the idea of micro schools? I'd love to hear your story, because I can already know so many families who are thinking the same thing, are thinking, no, it has to look this way and my kids have to get this experience. Otherwise they won't be able to do X, Y, and Z. But there's been a movement, and I'd love to hear how you came to this place.
Yeah. So I was a school leader in international schools with my daughters. I brought them back for high school. to have more high school options because my older daughter has ADHD and high functioning autism, and my younger daughter is gifted and had jumped a grade and done Johns Hopkins at Stanford and all this stuff. And I wanted them to have tons of options. And we tried 7 different options, and I just finally helped them graduate early. And options that continue the lockstep, go through the check off the box high school graduation requirements don't work. And so I'm a school leader, and now I'm a pissed off mom. And it's like, okay, so what am I going to do to be a part of the change? So in 2013, I opened a micro school where kids come first and where they have a voice in what they're learning. And I am finding schools like this all over the place. We just need to get to a tipping point. And the worries that we have as parents, oh, will they get into college? We have our 11th graders taking college English and passing it. 2 kids took it last quarter and aced it. So we're getting them ready and helping them experience college while they're with us. And colleges are loving seeing, oh, this kid did an internship. This kid took the initiative. They don't want to just see a transcript. So these kids are more than ready for what lies next. So it's not a detriment. It's huge. We just need to be willing to shift our paradigms and demand engaging, dismantled high schools that are new and engaging for our kids.
Right. And that just sounds like such a heavy and a big task, but you've done it. So how did you even know where to start? So you're thinking to yourself, these systems are not working for my girls. They need something else. I want to engage them in this learning process and have them learn in a different way. And obviously you started a micro school. How did you even know where to start and how to start? I know it's been probably trial and error.
Right, always. But starting small means that you can be more nimble and we can be more inclusive. And luckily, as a teacher, I got to start a school within a school in a high school that had over 700 kids per grade. So I got to create a smaller community for kids that were at risk of dropping out, that were bored or overwhelmed or whatnot. So I had that experience, and I saw you can use public school resources. We used a group of portables. We used vocational funding and pulled in and had some math in context and business in context. So taking something big and making it smaller makes sense. And in the public school world, schools within schools are all over the place. In the private school world, starting a micro school is just saying we want to have a small learning environment. And for us, we intend to stay small with no more than 30 kids on either of our 2 campuses, and then getting together for our projects and our camping trips and whatnot. So it's just figuring out what are your resources, who are you pulling in. So a homeschool co-op could shift to this. There are a lot of schools within a school that use part of a big public school and then use the rest of the day. They do their internships or they do their advisories or their project-based learning. There are choice theme schools. So there's so many ways. If you get small, look at your resources, you can start creating.
Right. And I can see this being so helpful for kids who just want to be more engaged, who don't want to just sit in a classroom and have people talk at them all day. But it also seems like such a great learning environment for so many of the kids that I see who think differently, who learn differently, and who would benefit from, again, that smaller model and that individualized and personalized learning experience that really gives them an opportunity to use their strengths and explore their interests while they're learning.
And this isn't just for kids that are neurodiverse and have challenges. That Wall Street Journal had an article a couple of years ago about the Montessori Mafia. So Montessori works.
Tell me what that is.
Oh my gosh. Well, Montessori has been around forever and is the basis of really good student-driven learning where kids create and they have mentors along the way and they get to go with their passions. That philosophy has permeated a lot of the alternatives that are out there for students. And they have found that Silicon Valley leaders, Amazon leaders, Julia Child, that all of these people started with Montessori and went off and were entrepreneurs and leaders. When we empower kids, and really say, yeah, go with what you love and take it, and we're here to help you, we we create people that are unstoppable. So it's not like, oh, for kids that can't handle traditional, it's why handle traditional content, memorize and forget? Why not empower all learners so that they can go out and be those people that are starting businesses and changing the world?
Right. And don't you think that this should be an option to all parents? It just shouldn't, it seems like and what you're talking about really is about a need to overhaul the whole education system. It's giving parents options. And, you have a child and your child is ready to enter the school system, and you look into your public school, your community school, or a private school, and you're really not looking at options in terms of the kind of learning experience. You're kind of looking at options in terms of the types of schools that your child can enter. But it seems like more parents should be aware of the options that they have when deciding to teach their kids and how their kids are going to learn.
Absolutely. And there are public Montessori schools that big picture learning is just a design model that all kinds of public schools are using. And we're taking pieces of, and private schools, anybody can take pieces of the design. It gets at that really empowering and mentoring middle school kids, and then getting kids out in the community for community engagement and internships in high school. So I know 3 different school districts around me in Seattle have a big picture learning component in their public school districts. We also have a bunch of choice lottery schools that are small in one of our neighboring districts. So there's models, but until we demand more of these and until we stop legislating, our teachers' hands are so tied with Common Core state standards and preparing for state tests that they don't get to create. They have to crank through the content to prepare kids for a state test until we dismantle the political pieces of it and free our teachers back to to where they can teach and mentor and inspire instead of covering content. We're kind of stuck, and we need to get unstuck.
Right. And we know that mentor model is so important. Both of my kids went to Montessori before they entered school. And I know the importance of that mentor model. I mean, that's the whole idea of Lev Vygotsky's work, right? That whole zone of proximal development.
Yeah.
It's so key to learning, and it enhances learning when you can learn in that way, when you have that mentor, and it just shows you what you're capable of.
Yes. And no, I focus on high school, but this applies K-12. No high school teacher said, I want to crank out, 5 classes of freshman English, 30 kids a class every day, and cover bases with 150 kids. Teachers are in it for relationships and to empower students. And if we could shift things up, then smaller would mean they could really know those kids and really be in the zone of proximal development. Hey, let's nudge you here. Whoa, let's slow it down a bit here. Lower your anxiety. And they could really be personalizing if they weren't in this broken assembly line system. And then they could really use their gifts instead of just being content dispensers.
Absolutely. And earlier on you talked about that, that social and emotional piece. And I always say that, learning occurs in a social context. And we know the research shows that kids are better learners and they have better mental health when they feel a connection to the adults in their lives, when they feel that they are valued and what their thoughts matter and their ideas matter. And when you have that personalized educational experience, again, it enhances that.
Absolutely.
The relationship.
Yeah. And the relationships at my micro school, between the teachers and the students is priceless and can get kids with school anxiety to come to school every day. It's just, it can challenge that gifted kid to take it up a notch and not just coast by and do the bare minimum. So when kids are known and feel like they're cared for, amazing things happen in the classroom.
Absolutely. It's the feeling of being seen. Like people see me and they know me and they're invested in helping me thrive.
Yeah. And then the kids are like, hey, I have a voice here, so I'm going to use it.
Yes.
And so they work on self-advocacy skills just naturally. Hey, could I do this instead of this? Or could I weave in poetry instead of this? And before they know it, they're really owning what they want. And
Right.
they take that out into the world too. And it's like, no, what do I want here? Do I just want a 4-year college, the same college my big brother went to? No, what do I want? They start to think about what they want and ask for it and are so much more empowered. And with all of the mental health issues that I know you see
Yes.
tons of, when we have a sense of self-efficacy and power, then we're not as depressed, we're not as anxious, we're not as powerless. So we can be shifting so many things if we dismantle our education system and create something with love and belonging, purpose and passion.
That is absolutely true. I feel like saying amen after all of that. But it can seem like a daunting task, but it's not. I mean, we can change things. You just have to have enough people who are willing to stand up and ask for what it is that they want and what it is that their students and their children need.
Absolutely. And if parents could say, wait, what was my high school experience?
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully, mine, I remember being a camp counselor and getting to leave a week every spring and be a 5th grade camp counselor. I remember mentoring those girls, helping them with homesickness. I remember a social studies class, world history, where I got to be a part of the Hindu caste system and do things to move, to be reincarnated at higher levels, and that innovation. And that's led to me wanting to work with kids and wanting to be innovative. I don't remember any of the content. I can't tell you what a mole is in chemistry. I can't tell you the difference between cosine, tangent, none of that. But the experiences where I really got to participate, not only do I remember those eons later, but I also have been guided by those into where I ended up. So if we can let go of the false nostalgia and say, no, it was when I got to be engaged, when I got to play to my strengths. Where is that out there? Not where are there tons of clubs, tons of foreign languages, 1,000 kids? No, we can shift it.
We can shift it. And it's funny when you were saying that, I'm thinking about back to high school. What do I remember most? And I remember the teachers who were motivating me to do the best that I could do. Right. Yeah. And so it really was the relationships. Again, it wasn't the content. Yes, I did well in that calculus class, but it was the professor, the teacher that I had that really made the difference.
Yes.
In terms of that experience.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I know that parents are listening and they're saying that this sounds perfect. I would love my child to have this type of experience. And I know that you have a micro school coalition. And it sounds like that is something for parents who are interested in starting a micro school, want to know more about it. Can you speak a little bit about what that is?
Sure. Well, being the founding director of Lead Prep, my micro school, that's my big job. But on the side, I wrote a guidebook the summer of 2019, and my former board president was contributing editor, and we're like, we can do this in 2 months. Let's do it. And so we have a guidebook on creating micro schools. And we said for colorful, mismatched kids, because this colorful, mismatched sock metaphor had been running around in our minds. And that's what our kids are. We don't want a bunch of white gym socks. We love all of our unique kids and want all kids to feel like they get to be unique. And then from there, I was able to create a little online class, and I had a cohort go through it this summer. And now we're a mastermind, and we've pulled in some other small school leaders. So there's so many ways people could kind of go through some steps and become a micro school. And I do some consulting on schools within schools and creating micro schools. But I'm just about what resources, what do you have? How can you take that and make that happen? How can I help you? And seriously, places like High Tech High in California, Big Picture Learning, there are some great models out there. Montessori, we don't have to start from scratch. And I always tell people trying to open their own schools to use the CASE strategy: copy and steal everything. Seriously, we're all about the kids. It's not, so you like that late start time, you like that flipped learning model, you like that internship model. Take what you need. You're going to do a boat building class. You've got the resources. Take from, do the cool stuff that you see around you and make it your own and go for it.
Right. And so it sounds like that coalition will help at least parents know where to start and will have the support that they need as they're trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah. And the site lists small schools that have asked to be on our coalition list. So it might even be a place where they could reach out to others. And an agreement that schools make when they're on our list is that they'll share anything with anybody. So it's like, oh, we have one in our state that's on this list. I'm going to call them up and just say, hey, how'd you get started? Or, hey,
Right.
what do you know? Because we all have to play together. And I want Apple and Google and Microsoft to start playing together with our educational leaders too, break down those silos and just have a huge consortium full of resources for anybody that wants to innovate in schools until the system's dismantled, until this is no longer the norm. But I'm seeing so many educational leaders and people like you that are like, hey, we all have to play together in private practice and education. How do we come together to serve kids? And I'm hopeful because more people are asking, how can we collaborate to serve kids?
And that is so important, that collaborative piece and the sharing of resources, the sharing of information. Because again, I think that's one of the reasons why I started Child Nexus is because we had so many, school heads of schools and practitioners who are working with kids who think differently, learn differently, but we're all in our own silos. But when we come together and collaborate and brainstorm and share our ideas and share our experiences, we're just better for it. We're better at helping families navigate through some sometimes difficult processes and help them better figure out what it is that they can put in place to help their kids.
Absolutely. We love working with the outside specialists, and we have brought in our own team, an SLP, an OT, and a counselor that are in the classrooms, and they're also working with us as teachers. And, from what I'm seeing, you guys might want to use this graphic organizer or this executive functioning strategy, and even they do some private work with some of our families so that we're all talking the same talk. And when we work with outside therapists or psychiatrists, it's really helpful for us to be able to say, here's what we're seeing in school, because what they might see in a private session is very different. And then working together, what strategy are you using? Okay, so the student comes to us in 6th grade and they've used a green light strategy for the last couple of years of elementary. How can we use the same wording, the same strategy, and provide continuity so this kid knows, those tools I learned before I got to lead prep still apply. And that's the nice thing about being small. We can take these resources and keep it consistent for the kids by adjusting on our end.
Right. And it's more of an integrative model, because the model now for kids who, may have anxiety or may need OT, like you mentioned, or language therapy, it's that they go to school during the day and then after school, they engage in all of these other therapies or support systems, but it doesn't get integrated into their learning experience.
And oftentimes the extra support is in isolation, where the student is struggling most is trying to put it in context or with peers, trying to perspective take amongst peers. So sitting with an adult and talking about how to perspective take just doesn't translate to them to, when I'm in this classroom, I could do this. So, integrating it just makes it relevant for kids.
Right. It's better. It's increased likelihood that it'll generalize to their daily life experiences, which is what you want.
And that's actually what we want with all of education. Instead of when will I ever use this chemistry? It's like, I'm studying up this little piece of it because I want to understand how it ties into a food science degree and what do I need? Making it relevant and integrated, learning or supports. Of course we want that. That's how learning sticks.
You mentioned your guidebook that you created for families. And so the guidebook that you created, and I love the title, colorful, creating microschools for colorful, mismatched kids. I just love that.
Yes.
But can you give a synopsis of what parents can learn from your book? Is it a step-by-step guidebook from, if you want to start a microschool, this is the first thing that you should do?
Yep. It is. It's just 7 steps. The first third of it is just describing our rainbow of learners, like a bunch of different categories of them, because we all tend to think that, my child's the exception. But 100% of my children were the exception. Both my daughters were. And I don't think that's uncommon, that a kid having anxiety or depression or being gifted or having an attention issue or missing social cues. I think that's the majority of kids. So first of all, we have to own that, and our lockstep system can't possibly address all of these different needs. So there's a definite need for smaller, for communal, for relevant. So that's the first third of the book. And then I just go through the 7 steps, and I've just broken it down. And then the third part is I just say, here's what Lead Prep did to start. Here are the 7 steps. Here's our templates of how we did this. Here's what we put together for our mission statement. And then there's just at the end of each chapter, 7 of the 7 steps, there's a little worksheet for what you can be doing. So it's basic stuff like starting with a mission. Who are you serving? What do you want to be about? Because we can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
Who is your tribe? And are you the educational leader or the business leader? And it's hard to be both. How can you get more people in that tribe? How do you market? How do you, some common pitfalls? And then in our mastermind course, we're helping people that are going from programs to full schools or small school and making it sustainable. We just keep unpacking dilemmas, challenges, and rolling out more resources to help them go the distance. Because getting open is one thing, and then staying open and growing and getting closer to, leveling up constantly is the next step. So we try to make sure that our mastermind group for the leaders keeps that going.
This is phenomenal. I know, and I really feel like this is the future of what education should kind of aspire to be. This personalized experience. And like like we've been saying during this conversation, is that this education system needs to change. The experience our children have and their children will have needs to be different than the experience that we had and our grandparents had. And I think this is a start.
I think so. And I think we would get even clearer on this if we would look at what would I want a 25-year-old to say about my school or about school in general? What does that graduate profile look like? And my daughters are mid-20s, and I hear things like, really? This is it? This is adulthood? I just work in a job that's pretty thankless to pay off a student loan. I'm kind of have anxiety and depression like most of my friends. This is like, wait, where's the joy? What? Or do we want them to say, hey, I know what I'm about. I know my passion and my purpose, and I'm doing it. I know how to be resilient. I know how to bounce back. I'm connected to my community. What do we want? Because if we don't know what the end game is and we're not aiming toward it, then we will just keep zombie-like, assembly line, putting our kids through this system with increased disengagement, increased mental health issues, and increased student loan debt. So I think we need to think, where do we want them to be and how do we get them there? And then we're like, oh, crud, this path isn't doing it. We have something urgent to do now because my kid's in it now.
There has to be a willingness and then the action that comes with that. Yeah. You have this great quote on your website that I pulled up. It's from Mother Teresa. And it says, none of us, including me, ever do great things. But we can all do small things with great love, and together we can do something wonderful. I love that. And I think that really speaks to what you are creating and the work that you are doing, because it's that whole idea of collaboration. What is possible when we work together toward a common goal of helping all kids thrive?
Yes. And it's, great love, baby steps. And some people are like, how? It's like, don't you just start taking those baby steps, use that great love, trust. And every time that I've been like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? This will never work in the history of the school, especially the first 3 years. There's so many ups and downs. It's kind of like I would keep taking baby steps forward, and something wonderful would happen. A friend from church would say, hey, I'm retired Microsoft. I'll come and teach STEM classes and robotics for free. It's like, oh my gosh, really? Or the place that we were renting is like, oh, you lost some students and your finances are a little shaky. We're going to lower your rent for the next 6 months. So it's like, you gotta boldly step forward. And another thing I like is sometimes the only mode of transportation is a leap of faith.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
And the guardian angels are out there and it does work,
It does. And you are proof that it does work. And the students that go through your school and other micro schools are proof that it does work. And I'm so glad we had this conversation because it gives parents another option. They can think about, again, the experience of their kids, the educational experience they want them to have in a different way, consider different alternatives. And I think that this is where we're kind of heading as a society. And I think this is not just a school that would work in the United States. This is a global philosophy, a global movement in terms of what the educational system can look like. And not just here, not just in Washington or Seattle or Los Angeles, in all different parts of the world.
Absolutely. And it is all over in little tiny pockets. We just need to grow it and make it more and make it the norm to have all of these options and all of this personalization. We can do it.
We can absolutely do it. Absolutely do it. My goodness, Maureen, thank you so much for being with me here today. I know that people are going to want to reach out to you and learn more about micro schools. I'm going to put a link to your website and to your book in the show notes. But what is the best way for people to reach you?
Any of those, probably though, just Maureen at lead-prep.org, because my school's my everything. And so I'm always checking that email.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure that we link that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for this conversation and for all the work that you are doing in this space. It's so needed and so important. Thank you.
Karen, thank you. And thank you for Child Nexus and creating this platform and this podcast so that families have these resources that they so need. You're an inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to learn more about microschools and Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy, check out our show notes with all of the information that you need to reach out to learn more. And I would love for you to get on our email list. We are planning a series of webinars and town halls, and I want you to be one of the first to receive those invites. So go to childnexus.com and sign up for updates. Thanks, and I will look forward to connecting again next week.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.